Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's session, and I hope you completed the assignment from last week. Last week, we started off with what is measurement in digital times, and we went through how measurement was done historically and also how it's done in a regular traditional business. Today, we'll be exploring what is it on the web that we need to measure, and this is a perspective coming from someone that owns a website or that manages a website. But before we go into using Google Analytics to measure something on the web, the first thing we need to understand is something called the measurement plan. What is a measurement plan? A measurement plan is kind of a thinking framework that allows you to understand what exactly you need to measure on the web. This is what will make you understand if you're making progress or you're dragging your feet, or for you to know what is good and what is bad practically. And this is dependent on your business. This is not something that business A or website A can have the same thing with business B or website B. Depends on what exactly you are doing in your business and at what stage of the business you are. So, in simple terms, measurement plan is a framework for you to be able to understand what you're going to measure and how to make sense of the measurement. So, how do you start off? I shared a framework with everyone just now in the classroom, and I'm going to go through that same simple framework, which is to understand what is the flow of measurement. And I'm going to be sharing my screen right now. We'll go through the measurement infrastructure, and then we're going to show how to actually break it down, because you just don't start off from day one inside Google Analytics code or any analytics platform code on your website and then you start measuring. That is a very bad approach. So I'm going to share my screen now, and we'll go through this simple concept. And as you can see on my screen, the concept is you defining what is your measurement plan, and then defining what are the technical infrastructure that is required in your measurement plan that needs to be implemented on your web. Then you have to create an implementation plan, and then you implement, and then you refine, you maintain, and then you go around. It's kind of like a cycle of defining the measurement plan, looking at the technical infrastructure or requirements for you to be able to implement those things, creating the implementation plan or project, implementing them, maintaining and refining. It's kind of a circular approach. But this is a framework of thinking of how to have a great analytics platform within your system. But so, what is the first thing? Defining measurement plan. And what I've done is I've just picked a very simple plan that you can find online, and they have a very good structure. Like I mentioned, your measurement plan is meant to be dependent on type of business and the stage of business you are. Say, for example, like in this example I have showing on my screen, you're a small e-retailer and you have several objectives as a business. You want to grow your business, you want to build your brand, you want to increase customer loyalty, and you want to grow and engage users on social platforms. These are kind of high level objectives. When you grow your sales and you grow the business, your revenue is going to grow, your market share is going to grow, and all of that. So it's kind of high level objective. Once you have this high level objective, the next thing is to define what are the KPIs that would make me identify if I am if my objective is going forward or is going backward. What are the things to measure growth or to measure sales? One, in this example, is your revenue. So how much revenue do I make this month versus last month? That is a KPI to know if I'm growing or not. The next thing you want to think of in sales and growth, for example, is growing your customer base. If your customer base is increasing and your customers are continuing to buy, your revenue will grow. That is just two examples of KPIs you can have under sales and growth. On the vertical of objective of brand building, the objective of brand building, a KPI could be increasing reach of visibility of your brand. So if your brand is seen in a small geographical location, for example, you're improving the reach of that campaign to a larger geographical location. For example, is you building a brand beyond the small location that users or potential customers can see you. That is a KPI, increasing reach. Another example of KPI would be improving engagement of existing customers, so which would improve customer loyalty. So these are just examples of KPIs. But then the next thing is, what are the things you can actually measure with this KPI? Because KPIs are what you would have as a manager. You would tell your team members that these are the KPIs for the quarter or for the month. But what are the things that would be measured to actually meet these KPIs? These are metrics. So these are the metrics that you're going to actually measure. So if you look at the measurement plan, it starts with objectives, then the KPIs, then the metrics itself. And then after that, you have segments. But let me just mention, what are the metrics? In this case, growing revenue. One is the actual dollar value of each transaction. So you want to measure how much money came in this month. But another thing you can measure is the number of actual transactions that happen in that particular month. So measuring actual transactions. Another thing you want to measure is what is the breakdown of revenue per category. For example, if I sell shoes and I sell wristwatches and I sell socks or something else. So I want to categorize my revenue by each of these vertical. This would give me an idea of where my growth is actually coming from. Is my growth coming from shoes, or my growth is coming from wristwatches? You also want to measure what are other measurement metrics. You want to measure the average order value. So on a regular day or on a regular month, what is the actual average order value a customer makes on my website? So these are examples of metrics you want to measure. And as you can see from this example that I have here from this image of this sample measurement plan, you can have several metrics under several KPIs and under several objectives. So depending on the business you are able to identify what is the most important metric you want to measure that is going to grow or improve a specific KPI that is going to achieve your goal. This is where most people usually mix the whole idea of Google Analytics or any analytics platform. They usually do not have a strong objective and a strong KPI they're trying to improve or they're driving to. So they do not know what metrics would lead to the other. Because like I mentioned in the last class, you're measuring because you want to improve it. So once you're able to choose the right metric that is going to help you improve a certain KPI and or objective, then you're tracking that and then you are looking at how this metric is going to improve that objective. However, there is a problem when you really do not even know how to set up a measurement plan, or you really do not know what metrics I should measure. The first thing I tell people is look at a metric that is going to tell you something that happened yesterday or 30 days ago or 7 days. These are usually called lagging metrics. So for example, average order value is a lagging metric. That is, in the last 7 days or in the last 7 hours or last 90 days, I can evaluate the average order value. That is a lagging metric. It tells you what happened before now. However, sometimes some of the metrics you want to measure should be leading metrics. What is a leading metric? A leading metric is a metric that can give you insight into the future. Insight into the future, how? So if you measure something like orders in pipeline, for example, orders in pipeline could mean sales or transaction that has not resolved into a proper sale or a proper revenue. It's still in pipeline. The difference in this is that if you have a leading metric, it tells you about the future. It gives you an insight into the future because in this particular example, the sales in a pipeline can actually convert into actual sales, which would then mean revenue. And when you're able to measure month on month, your leading metrics, they'll eventually result to actual metrics that will come lagging later on, but is a good indicator of what would happen say in the next 7 months, 7 days, or 30 days, or whatever, because you have measured that in the last 30 days you have this amount of revenue or transaction in the pipeline. So when time t is equal to 0, you're able to see what time t is equal to 1 is supposed to be. So that's kind of how I usually tell people how to come up with metrics that they need to measure depending on their goal. Look at two things: lagging metrics that tells you about the past, and then leading metrics that can tell you about the future. The other thing again that I tell people when they're choosing metrics is don't choose vanity metrics. What is a vanity metric? A vanity metric is that metric that makes you feel good. A metric that would show that yes, everything is going fine. That is a vanity metric. But you actually want a real metric, an actionable metric. An actionable metric is that metric that would show that you're good, but something may be wrong. And then you're able to take action. For example, in this example I have shown on my screen, which is grow and engage social community, which is a good objective. On the KPI of likes and follow, you want to grow your likes and follow. There is a metric that is being measured called new likes. New likes is a vanity metric. Why? Because for every single day, for every single week, you're going to get a new set of users that like your page or that like your brand. So it makes you feel good. It's a vanity metric. However, a better actionable metric would have been new likes per thousand visits, or new likes per $10,000 of advertising spend, or new likes per something. Why would you want to use something per another metric? You would because you want to actually quantify. For example, if I spend $1,000 on a social campaign, how many new likes do I get? So it's like new like per cost. This is an actionable metric. If this month I get 200 likes, new likes per $1,000 spent, but next month I get 250 new likes per $1,000 spent, I'm able to compare week on week or month on month the true value of my investment. So for every $1,000 spent last month, I'll get 200 new likes. For every $1,000 spent this month, I'll get 250 new likes. So these are two different ways of saying good or bad, because the numerator and the denominator is of equal width. But if you just want to measure new likes, it would always increase. or decrease whatever it is, but you don't know on what yardstick should you measure whether it's going up or it's going down, because there's nothing pushing or causing the new likes or decline likes. So that's vanity metric and actionable metrics. That's also something I like to tell people to measure. So like in this example, all of the metrics you have here, they're good, but some of them are vanity metrics, some of them are actionable metrics. For example, let me look for one that is an actionable metric. Most of them, by my own personal judgment, are actually mostly vanity metrics, not actionable metric. However, it is good to have the vanity metrics coming, and then you can use another metric to define how actionable it can be. For example, I would say the last measurement here, which is item per transaction, is somewhat like an actionable metric. So what that is trying to measure is the number of items I buy for every transaction. So if I buy on my platform today 2 items per transaction, but tomorrow I buy 4 per transaction, that is a good metric to let you know how much people are willing to buy for every transaction that comes to your site. The higher the number of items in each transaction, the better. And you're able to measure on the timeline this week versus the other week. So that would have been a good actionable metric to find out. Because if there's no transaction, there's no item. But if you just measure total number of transactions, it's just making you feel good. All right, so that is measurement plan. Now going back to the framework, the next thing is to understand what is the technical implication of some of the things you have defined in your measurement plan. But before I mention that, let's go back to the measurement plan again. After you have your metrics, the next thing is the segment. You also want to understand what segment would I be measuring all of the metrics that I've mentioned. So do I want to measure all of these metrics per device, per location, per channel of campaign, or per whatever makes sense to your business? So you want to define those metrics, so those segments that these metrics would be viewed from. So for example, brand building. I want to improve newsletter subscription. Like in this case, you can actually have a segment that says, I want to see newsletter subscription per location of traffic coming to my website. So you're able to define that as a segment, or per channel, maybe organic traffic or paid traffic and all of that. So you're going to state that in your measurement plan. The next thing you would usually want to have in your measurement plan, which is the last thing, is the target. Target is what amount you have set for a time frame. So say for revenue, in this example, you want to have revenue of $10,000 from the segment of location, Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana, right? You're able to set a target that is smart to say this amount on this metric per this segment. So it gives you a good picture beforehand of what to expect. So if, for example, in the last 30 days, you do not earn $10,000 as revenue in the channel that you've highlighted, then you know you failed. But if you do achieve that, then you know you're making progress. And you're able to know what to change or know what to change or what to improve as a whole. So that's really the measurement plan. Like I said, because of the segmentation, you would have a different implementation of the tracking code, for example. So you would want to write out some things that you need to implement on each of the segments that you have. So for example, if you want to segment per device or per platform, so you have mobile web and you have mobile app. So you're able to state, how do I implement all of this tracking per mobile web, then per mobile app? So you're able to highlight some of the things you need to do technically following the plan you've just created. Then you have to create an implementation plan, which is just a regular like project plan of how do I implement all of these codes or implementation of the tracking parameters, which would usually take 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 7 days, depending on the size of your website and the complexity of the project and what you have set up in your measurement plan. And then of course you implement. After implementation, you see data coming in, you make changes to some maybe segments or to some coding of your implementation, you refine, and then as the business grows, you again go back to measurement plan. So for example, you can have your first measurement plan as just sales and growth. That's all. Your KPI is grow revenue and grow customer base. And you implement everything that needs to be implemented. That's done. You come back again. I want to build my brand. What are the KPIs that you need to have in mind? What are the metrics that can be measured? What is the segment I want to measure these metrics from? And what are the implementation? Or what are the targets and what are the implementation requirements? I state that down and then I implement. I measure, I test, and then that's kind of the whole idea of measurement or of analytics as a whole. You have a plan, a measurement plan that is targeted to an objective, and then you implement the measurement plan and you test. So that's mostly how you come up with measurement plan. But then someone would ask me, how would I measure things that Google Analytics by default can't measure? Like I mentioned in last session, Google Analytics can measure everything from your website. All right, so let me stop presenting. Okay, cool. How do I measure other things that are not on my website? Because Google Analytics can measure everything on my website. However, you want to measure things like social following, social engagement, and things like that. Google Analytics has an extension of the capabilities that would allow you import in data. So you have third-party data or third-party activities that are outside Google Analytics. You can actually import them into Google Analytics, but with a bit of complexity whereby you have to define some other metrics that are not natural to Google Analytics. So for example, new likes is not a default parameter in Google Analytics. It's a data you can get maybe on Facebook, right? So you have the opportunity to either download data from Facebook or try an API and then upload that into Google Analytics. But before you do that, you have to define those metrics in Google Analytics. Once you define them, the definition will match the data when you import them, and then you can always do analysis based on that in Google Analytics, and you can always also tie it to other metrics and other behavior of users on your website. So that's the whole idea of what to measure, because you just don't measure anything. You need to measure something that is targeted towards an objective of your business, and then you have the codes from Google Analytics or from any other platform for you to implement. But the bottom line is, again, you are measuring because you want to improve it. So if you want to improve something, you need to have an objective of what exactly you want to improve. Once you have the objective, you define the KPIs, you define the segments, you define the target you want for that particular metric that you have assigned, and then you implement, you test, and you go again. So that's really that. Let me quickly go to questions if we do have questions. Metric, and we don't have questions on YouTube yet. Let me go to the class. I think I received a chat of a few questions. 1 minute. Okay, seems the question is not in. All right, cool. If you do have questions, please, you can leave your questions on the live chat on Facebook or within the classroom application. I would be able to read your questions and answer real time. So just the final point before we end today's session. There's some metrics that you really do not want to measure, not because you can't measure them. Like I mentioned last week, the web or electronic platforms provide an inherent inbuilt login system, which means a lot of data will be collected. Now, when all of this data is collected, some will be waste, some will be useful. But if you do not understand what you want to use the data for, you will just collect everything. All the data will be presented to you, and you would be mentioning different metrics, left, right, center, you thinking it's helping your business, but it's not helping your business. So for example, you are an e-commerce website, and there's a metric called bounce rate. And most of your users buy from your app as against buy from your web. But then someone sends you a report to say, oh, your bounce rate is high. Your bounce rate is about 70-something% or 8-something%. You should do something about it. And then you're troubled. Bounce rate is a metric that measures the amount of non-interaction on your website that result into an exit of your website. So for you, if you do not know that that metric is not important to you at that point in time, because say 90% of your users buy from your e-commerce platform in your app. The bounce rate that is being measured, that is say 90%, is of users on your mobile website that is less than 10% of your revenue. Should that disturb you to be worried? Shouldn't be, because maybe you do not have measurement for bounce rate in your app or your mobile app, or you have not considered that as something you want to improve on because you have not been able to see how bounce rate is going to affect your revenue. Or since most of the users buy on your app and there's no bounce rate, everything is fine, then there's no need for you to be disturbed about that. So you don't just throw around metrics, or you don't just measure them because the data just comes in, or you don't consider them. I'm not saying users you shouldn't consider bounce rate. You should consider bounce rate, but this depends from business to business. It depends on the situation of your platform, of your users, and this current situation you are in. But the most important part is to be proactive, to be able to come up with a measurement plan. Understand the reason why you have set up the measurement plan, and see how everything ties to a strategic objective that you have. And be expansive enough to be able to highlight the metrics that would show you if you're going north or you're going south towards your objective. And again, ensure that you have metrics that are both leading metrics, kind of giving you an understanding of the past, and then leading understanding of the future, and then lagging understanding of the past. And don't dwell too much on vanity metrics. Try to convert your vanity metrics to actionable metrics. Depending on your website, you would be able to understand what is a vanity metric and what is not a vanity metric. A vanity metric, like I said, is a metric that will make you look good. Number of new likes or even number of likes would make you look good. But the number of likes per cost of you acquiring that likes is a better actionable metric. So depending on whatever you're measuring, ensure that you translate your vanity metric to actionable metrics. And with this, you would have been able to put the right implementation in place and then eventual implementation. So next week, we would be discussing how to implement Google Analytics. How does interface exactly look like? How would I be able to see sense out of all the data that's been collected in a typical Google Analytics account? It's going to be the intro, our very first intro into Google Analytics proper. And I hope that by next week, some of us would have answered the questions to the previous homework, and you would be able to give me some questions or some insight into your website or into your business, which we can use as an example for next class, so we can understand what are the metrics you're measuring, how to implement that in Google Analytics, and how to how to measure them and see success. So that's for this week. Thank you very much for joining. I'll be on comments and in the class stream for questions. Do send me email if you do have any questions, understanding of this concept. You can always Google everything I mentioned today, how to create a measurement plan, how to implement Google Analytics. You can go ahead of the class and go learn that. What is a leading metric? What is a lagging metric? What are vanity metrics? What are actionable metrics? You can read all of this up. If you do have any questions, reach out to me. I would be so happy to help. Thank you very much and see you next class.